Well, hello there, and thank you for joining me for the latest edition of Telil 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cook, and we have a jam-packed show for you this week. Later on, I'll sit down with the PC MLA for Richmond, Trevor Boudreau, and we'll talk about everything from the state of emergency departments in our area to the topic of physician recruitment for the strait, and as well, some recent measures taken by the provincial government to address wind energy and green hydrogen development. You're also going to hear some updates on what's happening with Richmond County's trail strategy, and we're going to follow up on a monument project that was put forward by the people of Petit de Gras to celebrate the community's heritage and its Acadian culture. But we begin with this look at federal politics and how it could impact you and the way you vote in upcoming federal elections. The Federal Boundaries Commission for Nova Scotia has put a new proposal forward regarding the riding of Cape Breton-Canso, currently represented by Liberal MP Mike Kellaway. That riding could expand to include the County of Victoria and the western half of Antigonish County, including the town of Antigonish, and that could be renamed Cape Breton-Canso Antigonish. That proposal is currently in the House of Commons for debate and for further perusal, and it's not sitting well with Richmond Municipal Council. Here is the discussion that happened at last week's regular meeting of Richmond Council at the Richmond Municipal Building in Arichat, followed by some interview questions answered by Warden Amanda Mumbercat.
From the mapping, we can see that basically a new riding is being proposed that would be called Sydney Glace Bay, which I believe you could drive across in about 20 minutes, 30 minutes if if the traffic was heavy. And then the remainder of the riding, which we now know as Cape Breton-Canso, would become Cape Breton-Canso Antigonish, and it would include much of what is currently the Sydney Victoria riding, as well as the whole county of Antigonish. I'd heard some, blips and rumors about this, but at the end of the day, I was certainly surprised by just the vast area that it turned out to be. We're talking hours and hours of journey to get from one end of the riding to the other. And my concern is that the geography proposed will have a significant negative impact on any one person's ability to serve constituents and effectively work with municipalities in particular in the riding. We've certainly enjoyed, I think, a positive working relationship with our current MP and past MPs here in Richmond County. This will add additional municipalities to an MP's plate that they'll have to be working with. Not to mention all of the fire departments and all of the constituent issues and all of the legions and all so many things. It's more than just population. So I'm really concerned that about our ability to be supported, consistently with this new riding, and so I just wanted to bring it to council's attention for discussion, to see if this has twigged with you folks, if you have any thoughts on it. And frankly, I'm not sure there's much we can do about it. You know what I mean? It's being proposed right now, and I hope there's still some room for comment, but
I mean, presumably these new riding boundaries are driven by population. I'm guessing in the same way that our boundary review is driven by population.
Right.
I'm assuming this one is as well.
I am assuming so. Yeah.
I mean, and basically, I assume it's similar to our own boundary discussions that we had just prior to council meeting. Right at our meeting is that it has to be equitable. It has to make sense. Mm-hmm. So while I completely appreciate that this is not going to be in our best interest in terms of whomever would be our MP would have such a huge geography, I don't know what we can really do about that.
Yeah, I don't know. Aside from provide comment and advocacy, I mean, we don't have any direct influence.
I would venture to say it wouldn't hurt us to, again, reach out, whether it be in obviously not the positive, because if they're looking to implement it, we're looking not to. So then, but again, it wouldn't hurt us. We've sent letters off and opinions off in the past. I don't think it would hurt us to, whether we go to our province or just directly to them. I think,
It'll be through the feds.
It'll be through the federal government.
yeah, there's a chain of command as well, so
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to go through you as to them, or we just straight to them. Again, it's, I don't think it hurts us to send, it doesn't hurt us to send something off.
I just know from experience that folks in, many times people living in urban areas are making plans for rural regions, and I know what it's like when you're trying to represent a region. Somebody else is trying to represent a region much, much smaller. I know I don't need to tell you about that, Councillor Sampson, but sorry, Deputy Warden, but even just in terms of how long it takes to go and meet with people. It takes a day here to go and do that, whereas it could be an hour commitment in somewhere else. So maybe it's a discussion on, if we have concerns with this. If it goes forward, additional resources need to be considered. Whether it's additional staff for the person, or travel, or
For additional
whatever.
constituency offices that
Yeah.
Right,
would be
whatever it
geographically
is.
located or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Even now, I mean, it's a bit of a, it's a running joke how huge his riding is at the moment.
Exactly.
When he's way up in Inverness County and then trying to get to, Port Felix or something, that's quite a haul.
Yeah.
It's going to be much worse going from Meat Cove to Port Felix.
You got that right.
It's not like even the adding the Antigonish timeline doesn't, it's a population wise, yes, it adds a lot, but it's no worse than him having to travel down to Canton or something like that. It's actually much
Right.
easier. But it's as far as adding the Highlands into that, that's a huge change to the district, and
Yeah.
yeah. He might be looking pretty hard at that Sydney Glace Bay.
But again,
Fairly likely.
regardless of who runs.
Right.
It's irrelevant.
Oh, no, it is,
Yes,
and I mean,
yeah.
MP Kellaway's been great to do a ton of traveling. Like,
Yeah.
he's very visible within the riding, considering the size of it. But it's just, that's really exacerbating a problem that's already there.
So I'd make a motion that you send a letter to MP Kellaway, just expressing your concerns over the new boundaries. And I think highlighting, the geographic concerns, the service to constituents, and that you would hope that, either the boundary would be reconsidered, or, I think I would provide solutions, right? Or that there would be extra funding attributed to the constituency to allow for more constituency offices that would be geographically located or something like that.
Okay.
And of course, open to other suggestions that folks may have to include in that letter. I'm
No,
just
that's
thinking
fine,
from
yeah.
our conversations, those
Yeah.
seem to be the two.
I'd second that motion.
Okay, so the motion is that the warden draft a letter of support expressing concerns for the proposed boundary in terms of geography, service, and that the proposed boundary either be reconsidered or extra funding provided to allow for more constituency offices. To maintain the level of service, yeah. Okay.
With an aging population, holy smokes,
No, it's, yeah.
it doesn't make
it's-
sense.
Yeah. Okay. So we could send that off to MP Kellaway and request that he forward it to the
appropriate.
Federal Electoral Boundary Commission, or to whatever appropriate body.
Councillor Sampson's motion passed unanimously, and following last week's council meeting in Arishat, I spoke to Warden Mumbricket about her concerns and those of council regarding the proposed new federal riding boundaries.
It's a very real concern. It takes a superhuman amount of effort right now to be, visible and effective in a riding the size of Cape Breton Canso. It's a large geographic area with a population to match, and so we're really concerned that adding the entire Highlands as well as Antigonish County, it's just going to make it impossible for one person to effectively represent the area. Potentially you could have a situation where it's going to take you a full day to go meet with one group. That happens now in some cases. It's going to happen more frequently when you add that kind of distance and those kinds of numbers to the constituency. So these are some very real concerns that we have, and certainly as a municipality, We value our federal partnerships very, very much, and we enjoy a positive relationship with our MP. We have for many years, and we don't want to see that change. But we are very concerned that if there's the addition of all of this geography, all of these people, without appropriate resources to make sure that people, levels of service don't decrease, that's not going to be good for anybody in any part of the constituency. So we need to avoid that.
One last quick follow-up on this, and I know that this was connected to the restoration of Richmond provincially as an Acadian protected riding, but does the fact that Richmond was part of a larger provincial riding but was able to get back to its single county status give you hope as you folks begin to lobby the Federal Boundaries Commission to be able to reverse the decision that they may be about to make here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it demonstrates that there's a case that can always be made, when there are extenuating circumstances, and certainly, I'll be publishing some information on my social media about what these extenuating circumstances are, so that the community is well informed, and because I think that's part of the issue is that these, boundary reviews and commissions occur, and there's public participation, but it's not until the end. And it's not until the end of the consultation process that you start to see what the actual impacts will be, and that's where we're at right now, and so now it's our time to intervene.
Renewable energy is a key focus for Richmond Municipal Council these days. In just a couple of minutes' time, you're going to hear the latest on how Richmond is tweaking its wind turbine policy to be able to close up some loopholes and allow for more wind development on a personal and business level within the county. But before we get to that, we're going to hear from Richmond Warden Amanda Mumberket about the Marine Renewables Canada Conference, which took place in Halifax in late November. Warden Mumberket and Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton of Port Hawkesbury were co-presenters at this conference, which was also attended by several other Strait Area municipal and business leaders. Here's Warden Mumberket explaining what exactly happened at that conference at the latest regular monthly meeting of Richmond Municipal Council.
I just wanted to provide a verbal update to councillors because I recently attended the Marine Renewables Canada Conference in Halifax. It was, I just wanted to express what a great learning opportunity it was. Marine Renewables Canada has increased, I think, their level of participation in the Atlantic region in general. The sessions that I attended included, how to communicate effectively about marine renewable energy. There was a Women in Marine Renewables kind of networking event. We celebrated some Canadian firsts, primarily focused on tidal. But, it was also a great opportunity to hear from Premier Houston as well as MP Sean Fraser about their vision at both the provincial and federal levels for marine renewables in the region. Both Mayor Brenda and myself, we moderated the Power to X session with panelists that included Paul McLean from right here at our own Bearhead Energy project, Andrew Parsons from Simply Blue, Jonathan Cocker with some legal perspective, and a fascinating presentation from Kelly Tai from the Trade Council of Denmark in North America. And the lessons that we can learn from that international perspective were I don't want to say shocking, but they were just eye-opening. It was a fantastic presentation overall. And so, looking at those best practices, I'd say we have lots to learn there. Some key messages that we provided from the task force's perspective were that we have mobilized to build community capacity in Indigenous and rural communities here, that we've engaged with all levels of government because we have an opportunity to position our province as a leader in this nation-building green energy. We call it a revolution because I think that's the direction it's going in, but that the task force also has several guiding principles, and I know I've mentioned it here before, that we began with inclusivity, that grassroots capacity building, best practice learning, and that responsibility to share our ocean and wind resources with the groups, with all stakeholders, so including our fishers, to make sure no sector is negatively impacted. So, we discussed that Senator Christmas was instrumental in helping us frame our guiding principles and with a two-eyed seeing approach. And, his comments that we have enough runway with this emerging opportunity to get it right together still certainly resonate with us, and I think resonated with the room in Halifax as well. So yeah, just if you have any questions on that, just let me know. But I did want to give you an update because it was a really great conference, and many thanks to Marine Renewables Canada for inviting this region to participate. And I will tell you, there was a great showing from this region. There were probably 8 or 9 members of the task force there. Maybe more. So it was a Strait area en masse in Halifax.
Following the November 28th council meeting, I asked Warden Mumbercat about the Strait's role in the Marine Renewables Canada conference and about what kind of reaction the potential for green hydrogen and wind energy development in the Strait area is getting from those outside the region. So I was speaking to Port Hawkesbury Town Councillor Jason Aucoin, in addition to Melanie Sampson, for our roundtable show on Tel Il, and he told me that at that conference, someone well placed in the international green hydrogen industry, he had said to them he'd love to see the idea where the Strait could become the new Fort McMurray of green hydrogen, to which the industry representative said, "You're not thinking big enough. You could be the Saudi Arabia of green hydrogen." Your thoughts, and was the hype that big for the Strait at this conference?
It definitely was. So I'll poke a little fun at Councillor Jason Aucoin. He isn't thinking big enough, but I think he is now. Certainly, there is no end to the opportunity that's facing the Strait area right now. We are just sitting on what we have always known, certainly in the economic development world, as the gem of Atlantic Canada and certainly Eastern Canada. The Strait of Canso is an incredibly deep, ice-free port. It has fantastic private sector investment all along it. We have 2 common user facilities, the Port Hawkesbury Pier, and then the even bigger pier in Mulgrave, of course. We've got lots of lands, both green and brownfield sites available for development, and industrial parks on both sides of the Strait. So it's an opportune time for us. We're close to the European market. We have a history of servicing the offshore. Now we can be doing that in a very clean way. And it's really exciting, I think, to see the opportunities ahead. We're sitting on one of the, I think, top 2 wind resources in the world, if not the top one. So this is something we need to wrap our arms around. But again, to do that responsibly, we have to make sure that all of our stakeholders are engaged, and we've been taking that responsibility, I think, very seriously, and looking forward to continuing to do that.
Well, let me pick up on that quickly. You mentioned you and Mayor Chisholm Beaton of Port Hawkesbury made presentations at this conference. Can you give me a sense of what the municipality does at this point, or what any municipality does, to be able to advocate? Because obviously there's private industry involved, there's federal and provincial environmental assessment involved, but that being said, what can the municipality do to be able to advance this new green hydrogen and wind energy wave?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to be doing is we need to continue to learn. We need to continue to learn as much about this, what's been going on in other jurisdictions, and what the impacts have been, both positive and negative. We need to be consulting, right? So I think our role in a big way is going to be to make sure that the community is very tightly engaged in any kind of process going forward. And that's a responsibility I'm going to be taking very seriously. I know Mayor Brenda Chisholm Beaton will be taking it very seriously as well, because not that oil and gas was a bad experience necessarily for Nova Scotia, but we have some lessons that we need to make sure we learn from that process. So what happens when it comes to decommissioning? How do we make sure that our communities benefit first and foremost, and that there are agreements in place to make sure that that happens? So these are the things I think that we need to be making sure that we hold our provincial and federal counterparts feet to the fire on a little bit when they're negotiating agreements. It's what we need to keep in mind if we're negotiating agreements. So I think that's a big part of the role that we can play.
Warden Mumbercat's recap of the Marine Renewables Canada Conference wasn't the only time during the November 28th council meeting that Richmond officials dealt with renewable energy. Here's Deputy Warden and District 5 Councillor Brent Sampson recapping a motion from Richmond's Planning Advisory Committee dealing with wind turbines and their use in Richmond County boundaries.
I move that Council accept the recommendation of the Planning Advisory/Heritage Committee to have Eastern District Planning Commission staff research as-of-right wind turbine zone areas and report back to the Planning Advisory/Heritage Committee at a future meeting.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Could I have a seconder on that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Digdon. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
Green hydrogen and wind energy have also been key agenda items for the provincial government during the fall legislature session. Natural Resources and Renewables Minister Tory Rushton recently introduced several amendments to existing legislation to make it easier for green hydrogen projects to go forward. At the same time, Nova Scotia's Environment and Climate Change Minister Tim Holman introduced the province's new wind energy strategy and made several references to the Strait of Canso during the press conference that unveiled this strategy. So what does local MLA Trevor Boudreau think of all this? I spoke to the Richmond member of the PC caucus not long ago, and we spent a lot of time talking about wind energy and green hydrogen. Here's the first part of our conversation for Tellil 24/7 right now. Green hydrogen becoming part of the government's agenda, and a large part of that tying into wind energy and the government putting a priority there. Let's start with green hydrogen. Obviously, there is a company, Everwind Fuels, that is looking to develop green hydrogen here in the Strait, right in Point Tupper in your riding. But the Natural Resources and Renewables Minister, Tory Rushton, has put a big focus on closing up loopholes to be able to launch green hydrogen projects, especially those outside of Nova Scotia Power and outside of municipal units. So what can you tell me about why you feel this has become so big for your government and for your party at this time?
Well, that's a great question, Adam, and you kind of almost started the answer on your own, but really, like, it's this government's been pretty clear. We set some very ambitious climate change goals. So in the fall, at the very beginning of our mandate, we kind of announced kind of our climate change plan. Basically getting off coal, 80% of our electricity by 2030 being renewable. And there's a bunch of different ways you can look at doing that, right? There's a lot of talk about the Atlantic Loop and all of that and the importance of that. But green hydrogen has kind of brought itself in as kind of another opportunity to do just that. And what makes green hydrogen fascinating is it can be exported. So we can, companies look at this as a viable option for business, but it also can be used for domestic use. And so, with an Atlantic Loop, we could be users and consumers of some of the offshore wind that would be used to produce that green hydrogen. And we can, and with an Atlantic Loop, ship it to our neighbors as well. So it kind of solves a couple of issues and supports green jobs in our region. So that, again, if we're getting off coal, we're going to lose some jobs in that industry. But the idea would be is we have a trained workforce that would be ready and skilled and to get us to that green renewable job. So very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Are you excited that it looks like the Strait could wind up playing a role in a growing market for green hydrogen and green ammonia worldwide? I mean, we're not just talking about something that could be sold locally or used locally for renewable energy. It seems to be profitable all over the world. So what's your take on the idea that the Strait, not just within the Everwind development, although obviously that's going to be an anchor, but what's your thought about how the Strait area could play a new role in this global renewable energy revolution?
What Nova Scotia has that we've always had, I mean, we can talk about oil and gas offshore, but we've had a renewable resource offshore with wind that has been well known actually for quite some time. But we're not in a massive population. Nova Scotia is not 20 million plus like some places in Europe. So that development hasn't really taken shape. But what makes it economical for some of the large corporations that do this in Europe is that we can export it to large areas like Europe and Asia. And so the Strait area, it's no secret to any of us here. We've got a crown jewel in terms of our port and the development of our port. And this is being recognized across the globe, along with our wonderful winds that are offshore. And so it has a natural fit for those companies that are interested in exporting. And I will say, Everwind has been out of the gate, and certainly there are multiple large developers, including Bear Head has announced they're interested in hydrogen production in the county as well. But there are others, and in fact. Mayor Brenda Chisholm, myself, and Amanda Mumberket, the warden, and the Strait Area Task Force have I just arrived back from what's called the Marine Renewables Canada conference in Halifax, and it's the Strait area is on the map for everybody.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because it does seem like it's a team effort within the Strait to promote wind energy, to also promote green hydrogen. But it seemed that when the Minister of Natural Resources and Renewables, Tory Rushton, your cabinet colleague, brought out these new strategies in terms of legislation amendments for wind energy and for green hydrogen, he repeatedly brought up the Strait area as a key place for these types of developments to happen. So what did you feel like hearing Minister Rushton speaking so positively about the Strait? And do you get the sense that that's bringing everything full circle in terms of the efforts that people like yourself and Mayor Chisholm Beaton and Warden Mumbercat have been bringing forward?
What these types of things take is community support, community in terms of the municipalities, but the businesses, but the Indigenous community. And what that task force has done is, and I would say the minister would suggest this, as well as members in the department, this task force that kind of formed, we talked about it. We had a meeting, we've been at this probably 18 months. When I was campaigning, this had kind of come to my attention. And my first meeting with the Premier after he was elected, we were talking about the importance of energy and where the Strait area could fit in that. And it's tied in really, really nicely. And certainly the minister has recognized it from the get-go. We were a province that, and we still are a province that's learning about this emerging industry and the opportunities that come with it. But there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that too. So there's things happening both provincially and federally to make sure that we have the right tools to make sure this is done successfully and done right. The industry is primed. There's been a number of factors, whether you talk about climate change, whether you talk about Europe's dependence on Russia for energy and how they want to find partners that are sustainable and that are safe and are doing things the right way. And Canada is, what better country than Canada to want to work with? And so I would tell you, what could happen for Nova Scotia. But even all with this massiveness for Nova Scotia, it's quite small in terms of what the need is going to be in 20 years across the world. And so we are primed in the Strait area for, I think, multiple opportunities with hydrogen and offshore wind. And I don't want to get too optimistic and too excited. There's still a lot of work to do, but certainly, it was said this week at the Marine Renewables Conference, this isn't just a once in a lifetime or once in a generation type thing. This is nation building sometimes, and it's been talked about as the Strait as being in terms of the quality and quantity of the energy, the Saudi Arabia of green energy. So again, we've got a lot of potential, but we've got a responsibility as a province and as a country to make sure we do it right as well.
So just looking forward over the next little bit, I'd spoken recently to Trent Vishy, the CEO of Everwind Fuels. That company is going to be submitting its environmental assessment report to the provincial government, obviously to be looked over carefully in the coming weeks. We've seen the amendments just recently going through to the legislation in the recent session of the House. You mentioned the Marine Renewables Conference. So a lot is happening and a lot is coming in the days and weeks to come. What else do you see on the horizon in terms of not only your government's action on wind energy and green hydrogen, but in terms of the development of the sector overall? What can we look at as 2022 turns into 2023?
It's funny because over the last number of months, we've had a number of developers that have come to tour and see what the Strait area has to offer. It's quite amazing. A large developer, had done a tour, and before they did, they met with kind of the department, and the department was saying, like, I don't think you understand what's there at the Strait. I don't wait till you see the industry that's there, the green space that's there, the desire for support, the support that's there, I guess, from the community, but also we have an opportunity with NSCC sitting right here to make sure that we're creating the jobs of the future. And so I think if you talk to Warden Mumbercat and the mayor, they talk about how crucial some of our partners are in this. And so certainly the municipalities are important, but also the development of programming to make sure that we have the people that we need trained in the right way to make this successful, as well as making sure that all governments and industry in the area, we're open to developing that sector and supporting it. So lots on the go. I would say stay tuned. I'm sure you'll see others kind of touring around, looking at the Strait area for what the opportunities are with green hydrogen, but with offshore wind as well. I would say, we did have some legislation that was passed this fall. Some of it related to distribution, some of it related to the Innovation Fund, but you will see more legislation and regulations being created by the province and the feds to make sure that the transition gets there, right? We've talked about 5 gigawatts offshore wind, and to put that in perspective, Nova Scotia itself right now, at its peak, probably uses somewhere between 2 and 2.5 gigawatts of power.
Yeah.
We're talking about creating double that offshore in the next 8 years. And so great opportunity, but keep in mind that as we electrify, whether it's vehicles or heat pumps, our demand for electricity is going to go up. And so what a great opportunity to be in control of our energy rather than looking elsewhere for it. So, we're in there's a great opportunity here for both domestic and for that export. And it's exciting times, in that sense, as being an MLA.
We'll hear more from Richmond MLA Trevor Woodrow later on Tell Ill 24/7. But right now, let's shift the focus back to Richmond Municipal Council. The county is not happy with the progress of upgrades to the Oban Road, which was severely damaged during Hurricane Fiona back in September. There has been some progress on another Richmond County road that was also damaged during that period, specifically a roadway going through St. George's Channel. We're going to hear from Richmond Warden Amanda Mumbercat on both of these situations. Let's start with her concerns about the Oban Road and why Richmond Council is going to write to Nova Scotia Public Works Minister Kim Masland about it. Can you give just a little snapshot of what the residents are going through right now? That's in your district. What kind of troubles are they experiencing right now?
Well, it's just become an untenable situation. Right now, we do not have a timeline on the fix, and I know that a lot of that comes down to the availability of the contractor and the availability of equipment. But at the end of the day, we need a plan put in place to get this fixed before the snow flies in earnest, certainly before Christmas, because the washouts are such that residents can no longer move from one end of the community to the other. That sounds like an inconvenience until it's an emergency vehicle and something goes wrong and people can't get to where they need to go to access emergency services. So this is, it's become a safety concern. So certainly we're going to be, just adding our voice to the voice of the constituents there to make sure that the problem hopefully gets addressed before, like I said, before Christmas. It's time for this to be repaired.
Are they having to drive all the way through St. Peter's to get from one end of the community to the other?
You can't connect from one end to the other right now, on the mountain. So it's a dangerous situation.
All right. So Department of Public Works being asked again to come forward on that. What is the word on the washout, the bad one near St. George's Channel? What's the situation there?
Yeah. So to my knowledge, that has been completely repaired. And so, finally residents are able to move back and forth. And I have to say, the response time on that was really quick. And I do appreciate the work of of Nova Scotia Public Works on that. And I think so do the residents of that area, because again, another very dangerous situation. That was quite a hole. But as much as we appreciate how quickly that was addressed, we are really concerned about what's happening in Oban as well.
If you've been watching Tell Ill 24/7 regularly, or you've just been following the regular broadcasts and uploads of Richmond Municipal Council meetings here on Tell Ill, you might recall that Richmond councillors recently received the final draft of the county's new trails policy. It was put together with the assistance of Upland Planning and Design Studio, and it's finally ready to go to a vote to Richmond Municipal Council. So how did that vote turn out? Well, let's take a look at last week's regular council meeting to see how it went.
So the next item on the agenda is the trail strategy. So that was presented in full to us not long ago by Upland, I think it was, yes. So if there's no, if councillors would like to discuss the strategy, right now I'm suggesting that the trail strategy would be approved as presented by Upland, but would certainly open it to discussion beforehand if folks have additional comments to make on it or concerns.
I'm ready to make the motion. I do have comments as we're
Yeah.
getting ready to vote, but so I'll
Sure.
make the motion that we approve the trail strategy as presented by Upland.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sampson.
I'll second that motion.
So, of course, there are so many items there that are really great ideas, and of course, all of these great ideas come with price tags. And I guess I just wanted to say that I'm hopeful that when we're preparing for budget deliberations, and perhaps even before we start sort of official deliberations, that we perhaps have a meeting to kind of digest what is in that report in terms, and to prioritize what we think is doable
Yeah.
in the near and long term, because of course there are lots of studies and lots of infrastructure and basically a lot of dollars to be spent. And so that's really my only comment to that, is that I would like to see if we could set aside some time to allow for a bigger discussion of that study
Right.
in terms of what we can do with it, what's feasible and
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's something that we recently did with our accessibility committee as well. From the plan that was put forward, we
Right.
had to set some priorities. Those will be considered our budget, and so
Right.
we'll do the same with this.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Thank
Thank you, Councillor Sampson. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
Nova Scotia's Department of Health and Wellness recently revealed a new strategy to provide more funding to community groups trying to bring doctors, nurses, and others to our region. Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health was one of the beneficiaries of this program, which is designed to provide more resources to community navigators to help them in their drive to bring more medical professionals to put into our health system. So what does Richmond Council think about all that? Here's a look at Deputy Warden Brent Sampson bringing the issue up at last week's regular council meeting as part of the Committee of the Whole report.
I move that council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole to have staff reach out to the program director at Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health to offer support in the application process.
Could I have a seconder on that motion, please?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion is carried.
We're going to stay on the topic of physician recruitment and trying to fill vacancies in the local emergency department and also in healthcare facilities big and small across the Strait region. Here's part 2 of our interview with Richmond PC MLA Trevor Boudreau, this time talking about his government's approach to healthcare province-wide and in the Strait region. Part of the reason we wanted to bring this up is that there have been a couple of key developments on that front in recent times. Your government introduced a support package for community organizations like Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health to be able to expand and reach out beyond their current capacity to try to bring doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals to the area. That's available to similar community navigators all across the province. Your thoughts on how this particular direction could help things out in terms of not only Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health, but also around Nova Scotia?
There's no question healthcare is in crisis, right? Like, I'm a healthcare provider. My wife's a healthcare provider. There would be nothing more rewarding for me to see but success in that realm. And recruitment and retention are key to that. And so, our government has made some initiatives in terms of increasing the numbers of spaces for doctors and nurses and that side of it, but also on the recruitment side internationally. And so, we can use the example of the Ukrainian crisis. And so Ukrainians moving in, and, when you're having to leave your country really quickly, you don't necessarily carry all your licensing and doctor, like you don't have anything to say here. I'm a nurse. And so, it's always been with the College of Physicians and Surgeons or with nursing saying, we need to see your credentials. And so they've had to shift in terms of how they're working, hand in hand, the department and the college, to say, how do we do this differently with some of these people who are moving in that don't necessarily have those credentials in hand. And it's about clinical practice. So it's about getting them in practice to see about what it is they can and can't do. So there is a lot of discussions going on about that. There was a recent announcement in terms of support for navigators. So we're talking, instead of a $200,000, millions of dollars put forth, $2 million to support, projects that are for the navigators, like we have with Gina McDonald, who's here. And I would say, we had an event last week that Gina hosted a number of medical residents here in the county, and
It was a
We had
doctor appreciation night, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we actually had a number of local physicians there, as well as three residents and their significant others, and it was a wonderful event. And I must say, those are the types of things when we can get people and we can get healthcare providers in our community. There's no more welcoming place than the Strait area, and I will tell you that they left feeling welcomed and feeling engaged. And I'm very encouraged by what Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health is trying to do, and certainly, it's got a big piece of my heart as I was involved with it early on. And so I'm really happy to see that the province has kept that promise and injected some money into those things across the province, because really across the province we're struggling, and across the country we're struggling. If you turn on the national news, or if you go on websites from different provinces, you'll hear a lot of the same. And we need to not necessarily be fighting amongst each other, because we're all in this together. So it's about doing it the right way. So there's a lot of initiatives going on. It's hard in the media stream with everything else going on in the world to get that out there, but we'll do our best.
Obviously, this is a train that keeps moving from station to station. Where are we now? What do you see coming forward in the days and weeks to come in terms of physician recruitment, but also the general state of healthcare in our area?
So everybody knows the challenges that we're facing at the Strait Richmond. Certainly, it's not just with physicians. There was a temporary change in terms of the ER, and it was about protecting staff and protecting the safety of patients and making sure there was no burnout there. Nobody wants to see that ER closed, but we need to be attracting and getting more staff there to provide that service. And there are some things that are on the go right now. So like there have been CCAs hired that they listen to some of the nurses in the area and some of the younger nurses, and having a clinical nurse educator to support RNs that are new or junior and helping to retain them there. We did hire a full-time pharmacist for the Strait Richmond, and they're trying to recruit a tech. Some of the initiatives that have been going on, one thing this minister and the CEO of the health authority have been very motivated to do is say, if somebody has a good idea, let's try it. And so, for example, in Truro, one of the ER physicians said, look, like, let's try a virtual ER where, like, sometimes, if there's an ER physician that's in one hospital, but we have an ER that doesn't have a physician there right now, could you have somebody that's doing some triage, but that gets on virtually with the ER doctor, so they could have a look and say, yeah, this is something we can deal with. And they've been doing that there fairly successfully, I think, in the Truro area. And so they're looking how can we adapt that to an area like the Strait. And so, it would mean hiring some staff. And I think they're looking at hiring an advanced care paramedic and a ward clerk to be able to do that, so that you'd have some people there that could help and have access to a virtual ER doc that might be at another hospital, but can kind of jump back and forth and have a look and say, yeah, this is what I would do, or here's where I would go, or, this is what they need. I will tell you that what has impressed me about the minister and her team, that transition team, is they're willing to try things. They want to find something that works. And every community is a little bit different, and the needs are very different. But I would tell you, we've been able to move our ER systems in some communities to what they call critical care centers. And those are not like emergency rooms. And the minister knows that the ER at the Strait is essential. It needs to be a true ER. It impacts St. Martha's, it impacts Sydney, and certainly, so the intent is to be back up and running at some point when we have the right staffing to have a full inpatient, so that we can take care. It's a long road, and I recognize the frustrations. I have them myself, but I will tell you that it's not for lack of trying by that team, and I'm very, very proud of the work they're trying to do.
You might recall that the community of Petit de Gras recently unveiled plans for a new Acadian monument. It would celebrate the Acadian history, heritage, and culture of Petit de Gras, and at the same time it would also mark the 1755 expulsion of the Acadians. Well, the topic of the monument project came up twice at the recent Richmond Regular Council meeting. Here's what councillors have to say about it, and here's how the discussion on funding the monument is taking shape.
The committee discussed the grant request from the administration, Portuaire de Petit de Gras, Type 1 Infrastructure Grant Funds of $10,000. I move that Council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole to defer the Administration Portuaire de Petit de Gras Type 1 Infrastructure Grant Fund request in the amount of $10,000 to the next regular council meeting, and further move that staff explore funding opportunities related to the project with the Canada Community Building Fund and report back to council.
Could I have a seconder on that motion? So it's been seconded by Councillor Sean Sampson, or Councillor Mike Digdon. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
Later in the November 28th council meeting, the request from the Administration Portuaire de Petit de Gras resurfaced once again for the Acadian Monument Project, and this time around, the discussion was supplemented by some updated information from Richmond County's Chief Financial Officer, Jason Martel. Here's how the conversation went.
The next item on the agenda is a memo from CFO Jason Martel. Again, thank you, Jason, regarding the Administration Portuaire de Petit de Gras, the grant application Type 1 Infrastructure Grant. And in his memo to us, he is noting, I believe, that there is eligibility here for the CCBF, the Canada Community Building Fund, and is suggesting that it's possible for us to take the $10,000 requested to purchase the commemorative monument from our waterfront development that we approved on our 5-year capital investment plan for this fiscal year. So I think it's good news. Councillors, I would open for discussion as to whether or not you would support that.
Yeah, no, yeah, of course, I've been in support of this. I think the initial request at the start was $15,000 for us to put towards the monument to have our Richmond County logo on it. And I think we had discussed the possibility of $10,000 and still having the logo on it. Mm-hmm. And that was, kind of agreed upon. But, there's been situations that they had to work through to get to this point. So, and I appreciate CFO Martel. I appreciate the work on this. I know it's been going back and forth. I would welcome this for sure, and I'd put that motion forward, to take that $10,000 from the CCBF.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the motion would be that the Administration Portuaire de Petit de Gras Type 1 grant request in the amount of $10,000 to purchase a commemorative monument in recognition of the expulsion of the Acadians be approved as an eligible project and allocated under the cultural category from the Canada Community Building Fund, and then taken from the $50,000 tagged under waterfront developments as approved in our 5-year capital investment plan for this fiscal year.
I'm glad to see it go forward. I'm fully in support of this. My only comment would be that I think we want to just be clear to, I guess, anyone watching that this is operating slightly differently, coming out of a different fund. Because where the monument is already in place, whereas I know within my own district we had something that a project that was due to start, so they weren't able to apply because the work would have been started by the time they had the application in. And I just want, so everybody's clear that this is under a different fund, and that's why there's different rules for this. But glad to see this moving forward.
Yeah, no, it's a great clarification. Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Warden. Okay, so if there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
Richmond Municipal Council has issued an official response to a request to support new legislation that would see municipalities being given a greater say in whether or not to raise the tourism marketing levy in their regions. That levy is applied to the cost of room rentals for large and small accommodations across Cape Breton Island. And Destination Cape Breton Association has been pushing for the rate to be increased from its current 2% up to 3%, and to give municipalities the option of doing that on their own. Well, according to Richmond municipal officials, they're ready to make a move on this topic. Here is Deputy Warden Brent Sampson explaining the county's strategy as part of the Committee of the Whole report released at last week's regular council meeting at the Richmond Municipal Building in Arishat.
I move that Council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole to have Warden Mummerket draft a letter to the province in support of the following amendments to the marketing levy legislation proposed by Destination Cape Breton. A, that a new legislation state that the levy will apply to all fixed-roof accommodations as defined in the Tourism Accommodation Registration Act, which includes Airbnb and VRBO, regardless of the number of rooms. And B, that the language for usage of the funds be changed to Funds collected will be used exclusively on activities and programs that directly support the development of the tourism industry and the marketing of destinations from which they were generated. C, that there is a seamless process to replace the current Cape Breton Island Marketing Levy Act with the new legislation, so there is no impact on planning or budgeting for Destination Cape Breton. And further move that the letter encourage all Cape Breton municipal units to participate.
Okay, the motion was a mouthful, and this is currently on the floor. Thank you, Deputy Warden. Could I have a seconder, please?
I will second.
Thank you, Councillor Melanie Sampson. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
Of course, we're full swing into December right now, and Christmas-themed activities are happening all over Richmond County and around the Strait area. That includes an activity put on every year by the Lewisdale Lions Club. However, you might be surprised to hear how active municipal politicians are in funding this particular activity and what kind of conversation goes into providing that funding. So here's a recent conversation that took place at last week's regular council meeting for Richmond. Melanie Sampson, who is the Richmond councillor for District 3, including Lewisdale, kicked off the conversation. Here's how it went.
I mean, the Lewisdale Lions Club is no stranger to this table. We've talked about events they've held many, many times. We've been to events they've held many times. I know the warden and I have absolutely been to this event previously together and been to lots of different events that they've held. Their events are not only attended by folks within the district, but certainly by people across the county in general. I'm pretty confident, Jason, you can correct me, I have somewhere around $3,200 or something left in my district fund, am I right? So, I mean, I certainly am happy to put a good chunk of that towards it, but I would hope that other councillors would be supportive as well towards the $2,500 that they're requesting. I know some of us don't necessarily have all of the money in the world, looking perhaps at our warden.
Little slim.
I think the warden's got $38 for you.
Yeah.
My piggy bank is pretty low.
I think the warden has $338 if I'm going to be exact, but I'd like to see us support this. They've not come to us previously looking for money, and they do lots of wonderful things in the community, and I think $2,500 is a reasonable ask from them for this.
Yeah. Okay.
What's remaining in the general fund at the moment?
6,500.
250. Yeah.
What was our ask for?
25.
No, but for what purpose?
So they do a holiday event. So part of it is they have all their sidewalk displays. Then they do a jingle bell walk from the church up to their location, singing carols. Santa's there, hot dogs, marshmallows, fireworks, the whole shebang.
That location
Literally.
is right across from the co-op.
Yeah, it's
right?
wonderful, wonderful spot.
Okay. Any other comments?
I think in support of it in general. I'd prefer to see whatever remainder come out of the general fund rather than the district funds, only
Sure.
because I just don't like to. If we were at the end of the year, I may look at it differently, but seeing as there's almost half the year to go.
Mm-hmm.
You prefer to see more come out of?
The regional fund.
The regional fund, right?
So if we win half and half, Councillor Sampson, would that work for you? Or
Yeah,
or
I mean, I can probably do you a little bit better than that. Maybe I could put 1,500. I do have a fair bit left in my fund, and I don't have anything sort of at the top, that I'm seeing coming my way between now and March. I wouldn't want to get rid of all of it because we still have quite a few months left. But if I put 1,500 and 1,000 came out of the general,
Yep. I would support that, yeah.
Okay.
that's easy for everybody then.
Okay.
So I move the approval of the Type 4 grant for the Lewisdale Lions Club in the amount of $2,500, $1,500 to come from District 3 funds, and $1,000 to come from our Type 4 fund.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. Could I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that
Councillor
motion.
Sean Sampson has seconded the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
And we'll wrap up this week's edition of Tell Ill 24/7 with one more visit to PC MLA Trevor Boudreau. However, this time around, I'm not going to ask the MLA about politics or even about something connected to his Richmond riding. Instead, this was a personal honor that he was surprised to receive earlier this fall. Here's how my conversation went with PC MLA Trevor Boudreau when it came to his special recognition for his work in the chiropractic field. I always swear to my guests I will never hit them with a gotcha question, but I will hit you with one. But this is a nice one. You were just named Chiropractor of the Year by your colleagues, and I just want to get your general reaction to that and also see if you've gotten any kind of accolades from your provincial colleagues as a result of being named Chiropractor of the Year. How did that all shake out for you?
Well, look, it's quite funny. So the Chiropractic Association has a conference every year, and they give out awards. And so our conference was actually supposed to happen during Fiona. So the weekend of Fiona happening was when the conference was supposed to happen, and I was booked in to go to the conference, and but then it got postponed, and it got postponed to, well, I don't know if I guess it was late October, early November. My brain is a bit foggy right now, but my wife was making sure that I was, you got to drop into that for a little bit. So Sarah was kind of saying, you should drop in. And I had another conference that I was going to that weekend. So I made a point of showing up, and lo and behold, I was awarded the Nova Scotia Chiropractor Year. And as they're starting the kind of presentation, Sarah and the kids kind of walk in. So Sarah had known about it and had provided them with some of the information, and it's quite an honor. There are some people who have done a tremendous amount of work for the profession. Chiropractors have become more and more mainstream in terms of what we do, and very proud that they think. I've taken a little bit of a different route as a chiropractor. So a lot of people get involved in the college or involved in the legislative stuff or whatever. But I got involved in the political side, and they've always wanted to know how I'm doing with that, and whether it was a municipal councillor or provincial. And so I think what they've recognized is, I hope that I've given the chiropractic a good name as somebody who's been a responsible citizen and a respectful citizen, and got, chiropractors are making contributions to the community in other ways. And I'm gonna grab something here. I'm gonna jump off screen because I'll show you.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
And so this is a vertebrae of a humpback whale, of a juvenile humpback whale that was found actually on the shore in Yarmouth. And so this was part of my award that I was given. And so I was quite impressed. And I mean, a larger humpback would quite a bit larger, but it's bigger than the vertebrae that I typically work on. So, but look, I think one other point, and I'll give my colleague Derek Mumbercat a bit of a shout out. It spread around the legislature pretty quickly that I got the award, and Derek got up in the House and kind of recognized me, and it was quite comical a little bit, because Derek and I, we're Cape Bretoners. Cape Bretoners stick together, right? And so sure. So Derek had got up and said, we strategically place our Cape Bretoners all over, to take over the world. And I thought it was quite a funny joke, and it's real. Like, Cape Bretoners are doing some great things all over the world, and it's if we dig a little deep, we'd be quite impressed with how well Cape Breton has represented us. Cape Bretoners have represented us over the years, so I'm very proud of it. Very humbled about it. You never do this stuff, including being an MLA. I never got into this for glory. You do it because you want to see the community do better. And I thank you for kind of reaching out and asking about it, but yeah, no, you do this because you want to make a difference. Chiropractic is a caring profession, and I think an MLA, if you use those same tools as an MLA, I think I hope it helps. So that I'll leave it at that.
And there you have it, folks. That wraps up this week's edition of Tell Il 24/7. Thank you for tuning in, and a special thank you to my interview guests this week, MLA Trevor Boudreau and Warden Amanda Mumbercat. And big thanks as well to my colleagues at Tell Il Community Television for filming and formatting the municipal council footage that was used in this episode, Callan Cowan, Nick Boudreau, and Becky Boronow. They're also responsible for the interview footage with myself and Warden Amanda Mumbercat. And I'd like to thank once again our French language correspondent Gabrielle Sampson for the video footage from the recent ceremony unveiling the Petit de Gras Monument Project. If you have any comments or thoughts about what you've seen over the past hour on Tel Il 24/7, or you'd just like to make suggestions for future shows, feel free to contact me directly or to contact Tel Il in Arichat. And don't forget to follow Tel Il on social media. For now, I'm Adam Cook. Thank you once again for tuning in to this week's Tel Il 24/7. I look forward to seeing you again next week with a brand new show. Bye for now.